Well, I'm here tonight to talk to you about Sarah. Oh, please be seated. I'm here tonight to talk to you about Sarah. Her story is told in 5 segments over 7 different chapters in Genesis. We've heard one here directly tonight. There are numerous other references in both the Old and the New Testament to Sarah. And actually, Sarah is mentioned more in the Bible than any other woman, even more than Mary. She is the most mentioned woman in the Bible. It's interesting that the story of Sarah is told, I think, from a male perspective. I find it interesting that another male has been asked to speak about her tonight. I'm not quite sure what that says, but now who is Sarah? So she is the wife of Abraham. She's also Abraham's half-sister. Now, Sarah was originally called Sarai, but received the sacramental name Sarah from God. She is the matriarch of Israel. She is a princess and a beauty. Sarah is a model of faith, but also of human imperfection. Sarah lived to the ripe old age of 127. Now, Sarah and Abraham, they lived a nomadic life. They traveled from Ur, which is in Iraq, all the way to Egypt, and then back east to Canaan. And in those travels, they were always basically kind of in exile. They were aliens. They were never accepted in their community. Now, we heard one of the stories of Sarah here in our reading tonight. The context for her story is that God had promised Abraham that he would be the father of a great nation. Sarah is a beautiful woman, but is barren. To better understand Sarah, we need to hear about her other stories. The first story we hear about is when Sarah and Abraham are in Egypt. And Abraham convinces Sarah that they will tell the Pharaoh that Sarah is his sister. It's true, she's a half-sister, but it's only half the story. They did as Abraham wanted because Abraham was afraid that he would be killed and that the Pharaoh would take Sarah into his harem as one of his wives. Well, although Abraham isn't killed, Sarah is taken into the Pharaoh's harem. The Pharaoh has sex with Sarah, and afterwards the Pharaoh and Egypt feel the wrath of God. The Pharaoh returns Sarah to Abraham, and he pays compensation to Abraham. In our terms, he paid worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But Abraham was the one that had deceived him. The Pharaoh had done what was accepted and normal. In story 2, we come and we meet Hagar for the first time. Hagar is Sarah's slave, or one of Sarah's slaves. Because Sarah was barren, she decided that she was going to intervene and help Abraham to have a son. So she gives her slaves, Hagar, to Abraham in order to conceive a child. That child is born, is a male, and we'll hear more about him later. Story 3, we're told in our reading tonight of the visitors. One of them is the Lord. And he restates his promise to Abraham and indirectly to Sarah that they're going to have a son who is going to be the leader of great nations. Now, at this time, Abraham is 90 and Sarah is about 80. So if you look in your newspaper account, you'll see that I put some, little bit of skepticism in how people might react to that news. Story 4, we come to, and they're again traveling. They're in a different land. And Abraham and Sarah are again deceitful about their relationship. And in this case, Sarah is offered to a king to join his harem. This time, God steps in directly and protects Sarah from the king. The king repents when he realizes the situation and is forgiven by God. But again, it was the deceit of Sarah and Abraham together that led to this whole situation. Now, story 5, and that's part of the second story that I've handed out, is the birth of Isaac. And Isaac is the son for Sarah and Abraham. And now Ishmael, who is the son by Hagar, but he's about 13 or 14 by now, he is, there's conflict between Sarah and Hagar and Ishmael. And out of that, eventually, Hagar and Ishmael are expelled by Sarah from the community and sent out into the wilderness to, I think she hoped, to disappear. Doesn't turn out that way because God steps in to protect them. Now, what do these stories tell us? And I think we see that Sarah is not a saint. She displays jealousy of Hagar and Ishmael. She did not believe God's promise that she and Abraham would have a child, and therefore allows Abraham to use Hagar to produce a child. She sends Hagar off into the wilderness with her son to not making any provision for her. She lied or was part of lies. So it's pretty clear that God does not choose people who are perfect to do his work in the world. In terms of our reading tonight, the story is about 15 to 20 years after God first made his promise to Abraham that he would deliver him a son. It's the second visit that Abraham has received in about 3 months. And God is very direct this time in terms of telling Abraham he and Sarah are going to have a son. It's interesting that God does not speak directly to Sarah. Sarah is in the background. Now, Sarah again lies by denying that she laughed. So this is part of a, human frailty in terms of her response to that news. It's interesting to note in this story that God needs the humans to act in order for his promise to be fulfilled. And we can contrast that with the birth of Jesus, where the Lord intervened directly and looked after it. Now, I want to look at Sarah from some different perspectives. She was a beauty even in her old age, because it was when she was well past 80 that she had the encounter with the second king. So her beauty was a gift, but also a curse for her. In the male-dominated society, it was clear that she was a target of lust by men. It's not known from the stories if she used her beauty to achieve things she wanted. Now, as I've indicated, Sarah previously could not produce a child for Abraham. At that time, a woman was valued for producing offspring, particularly sons. Her inability to conceive was a blight on her life. It would reduce her status in the community, and this led her to give her slave Hagar to Abraham. Sarah obviously felt great pressure. Now, just so we understand, what she did in terms of offering her slave was accepted in Jewish law. This was the norm that would happen for a couple who found that they were not able to have a child. So this was, from the community's perspective, this was an accepted practice. Now, Sarah was a strong woman. When Abraham didn't want to send Hagar and Ishmael away, Sarah stood up to him. Abraham respected Sarah's right to determine what she wanted to do with Hagar, because Hagar was Sarah's slave. She was her property, and it was up to her what would happen. Now, it must have been very difficult for Abraham because he'd grown close to them. And indeed, he loved Ishmael as a son. But Sarah, asserting her rights, made it clear that what she wanted to happen, and indeed it did. Now, twice Sarah was put in harm's way in order to protect Abraham. Was she consulted? What did she think of this? If you are a woman, would you do that for your partner? If you're a man, would you do that to your partner? As Sarah was to be the mother of Israel, God intervened to protect her. Now, Sarah was a beautiful and strong woman who showed no signs of terror in her situation. Or maybe it's that the storyteller, who is a male, doesn't center in terms of her feelings and does not fully report what she felt. She showed her humanness in her jealousy, her acts of injustice, her lies, her impatience with God's plan. She was faithful to Abraham. Her faith in God increased as her life proceeded. There are many things we don't know about Sarah and how she felt. And I think it's dangerous to use the lens of our current norms to project feelings onto her. So I'm not going to even try. The overall story is God's plan for the creation of the nation of Israel through Abraham and Sarah. Sarah is the mother of Israel and thus has a vital role in the whole story. The overall story demonstrates God's understanding of the weakness of humans and his willingness to intervene at times to protect us. The people God chooses to implement his plan are not perfect as they are humans. The people are everyday people like you and me. Now, I had 4 questions for you to think about. Is it God's plan that women be subjected to domination by men? To that I answer no. Do we hear God's plan for us? For me, I say sometimes. Are we patient enough to wait the implementation of God's plans in God's time? Not usually. And for me, and are we strong enough in our faith to follow the path? Sometimes. What is God's plan for you?